Hey Blue Table fans, we got a lot of things going on at the studio, but I just couldn't leave without making at least one video, and of course the thing on foremost of my mind is Warhammer 40K 6th edition, which is super exciting. The more I read about it, the more I love it, and I think that it's going to be great. Alright, let's talk about reserves. I'm going to explain it the best I can and hopefully give you some insights and instruction. First off, when you're deploying, you can put up to half of your units, rounding up, into reserve, and that means they come on the board later. So if this were my army, and by the way, I did take the giant orc army. I am pulling that from the web store. I've taken out a studio orc army from it, and the remainder, which is about half, those will go up on the web store probably in the next day or two as individual lots. So anyway, just so you know, this is what I picked out of it. And this stuff, tons of cool conversions and awesomeness. So in this army we have a dreadnought, 3 kilocans, a unit of mega knobs, a war boss, a unit of boys, a unit of scorches, whatever this is, probably some heavy support thing. I'm a little embarrassed, I don't know what it is, but it was too cool not to have out there. And I have a unit of boys in a transport. So, how many units are here? Okay, the first item is the unit of boys in a dedicated transport, which was bought under their unit list entry. That only counts as 1. So, how many things do I have here? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that means I could hold up to 4 items in reserve. If I added a unit, say another independent character, I could put 5 units into reserve. The thing that hit me is that whoever deploys first, and very likely has the first turn, does have a little slight disadvantage, which is that he has to show his opponent how much of his stuff he's putting in reserves, because it says the time that you decide this is when you are deploying your army, is when you put things in reserve. Okay, an important aspect of reserves is that during deployment, when declaring which units are kept as reserves, the player must clearly explain the organization of his reserves to the opponent. So, for example, let's say I decided to keep these guys in reserve, and I would have to then decide, is this guy a separate reserve, or is he joining this unit, like this? And so what you've got to watch out for is your opponent, through artifice or maybe just absent-mindedness, might not declare that. He might just keep his independent, he might say, well, here's my reserves, and I'll keep his independent character separately. The way the rules are written, that independent character can't just join, he can't say, all right, I'm rolling for this unit to come in, bow, and okay, so this guy's going to be with them and they're going to come on. If he didn't say, take the initiative and say he was going to join this independent character with this unit as a single, I guess, reserves roll, then it doesn't count. So the way I'm reading it, and I read it verbatim to you just there, the person setting up their reserves does have a responsibility to make it clear exactly how it's working. It's the same thing for Deep Strike. If you read the Deep Strike rules, you can't just say, so let's say I had a unit of Space Marine Assault Marines, and let's say they had a chaplain with jump pack, and let's say these guys have the Deep Strike rule. Well, guess what? According to the Deep Strike rules, you must declare to your opponent when you're doing your reserves that this unit is arriving via Deep Strike. If you keep them off the board in reserves and don't say this unit is arriving via Deep Strike, they arrive as your regular reserves. So again, there's that word, you got to look carefully, I think, to the word must there, that in order for it to happen, you must declare that they are deep striking, if a unit has the Deep Strike rule. Let me just read it verbatim. It says, in order for a unit to be able to deep strike, all models must have the Deep Strike special rule, and the unit must start the game in reserve. When placing the unit in reserve, you must tell your opponent that it will be arriving by Deep Strike, sometimes called Deep Strike Reserve. So I think my view would be when my opponent's setting up, if he has any reserves, I would even ask him, because you never know what they have in the bin underneath. You know, the table. They just be like, oh yeah, these guys are now deep striking in here. Whoa, 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 easy. I didn't even know those guys were there. And so it would, I think it clears up confusion to just ask your opponent, do you have any reserves? Are any of your reserves deep striking? Do you have any independent characters attached to units? Okay, transport vehicles. So you have to specify if any units in reserve are embarked upon any transport vehicles in reserve, in which case they will arrive together. So you really do have to set up your reserves correctly and make sure you're making clear what is attached to what. A note about transports, dedicated transports. Dedicated transports can't start the game with a unit other than the one that it was purchased for inside. If I'm reading it right, they can begin separately. So if I were setting up my reserves, I might say this truck is separate from the unit of boys that it was purchased for. However, dedicated transports, as the game progresses, can pick up other units. Another giant thing about reserves in 6th edition is the roll. You start on the second turn, and you roll for each item. If I read it right, you roll for all the things that are going to come in first. You don't roll and then deploy. Roll, oh, that came in, let's deploy that. You roll for all of them, and then you bring them on from reserve. Hold on. So it's a 3-up. Turn 2 is a 3-up. Turn 3 is a 3-up. And turn 4 is automatically everything comes on. Whereas it used to be turn 2 was a 4-up, turn 3 was a 3-up, turn 4 was a 2-up, and you could actually have something not show up until pretty much it was too late. So that's a feature I really like about 6, is that things do show up from reserve way more reliably. Also, the rulebook says that things that have to begin in reserve do not count towards the number of units that are deployed. The only thing I can think of is a mycetic spore for Tyranids. So if you had a bunch of mycetic spores with units in them, you would discount those for purposes of reserves. But does that mean a mycetic spore can just come down with no unit in it? I wonder. I'd have to read that a lot more carefully. Okay, units arriving from reserve start as if they were butted up against the edge of the board like this. So this unit moves on. I guess it could move 12 or whatever it is, right? But it starts as if it were on the edge of the board. You don't put the unit here and then move it. If for some reason a unit, like let's say this guy were 7 inches long but could only move 6 inches, so you know it would be hanging off by an inch here to move it the correct amount, you actually move it on until the back part is against the edge of the board. There are limitations on what a unit can do when it arrives for reserve. Let me read those to you. A unit cannot charge or use any abilities or special rules that must be used at the start of the turn. In the turn, the unit arrives from reserve. So it doesn't technically count as being on the board from the start of the turn. Can you think of any examples of where that would possibly matter? Conversely, it seems to me you could shoot, use psychic abilities, and so forth. You really just can't charge or use beginning of the turn abilities. There's another thing called ongoing reserves, and that is the most notable thing I can think of is flyers. Flyers that accidentally fly off the table. In fact, can they do it on purpose? I'm really not sure. They automatically come in the next turn as part of reserves. Flyers, by the way, are a really huge part of 6th edition. I'm predicting you're going to see flyers as a major list building choice. What to include, how to deal with them, that whole aspect. Well, anyway, that is what I know about reserves. I hope that I've been clear and have helped you gain a greater appreciation for 40K 6th edition. I know I can't wait to get some games in. It's been really quite hectic the last few days, but I do have someone coming down to do a bat rep with me, and I'm probably going to get out the studio Necrons, which are done, and I'm really excited about that. Thanks for tuning in.